At the edges of the Arctic, the Inuit turned survival into an art form. They craft custom-made anoraks designed for wind, snow, and long journeys. Each piece is made from local hides, chosen for the warmth they hold. In this way, tradition and technique come together to protect the body and tell the story of a people. At the end of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th, a photograph shows a Native American woman. In daily life, many were responsible for the home and its belongings. In several nations, they also influenced politics. Even with male chiefs, it was up to them to decide who would lead the community, setting its collective direction. Cynthia Ann Parker, known among the Comanches as Nadua, had an unusual fate. Of Caucasian origin, she was taken during a raid at the age of 9. Instead of remaining a captive, she was welcomed and integrated into the tribe, adopted their customs, built a family, and shaped her identity and future there, becoming part of the Comanche Nation. Before we continue, go ahead and click subscribe and hit the bell. That way, YouTube knows this content matters and shares it with more people. In the 1920s, a photograph captured an everyday gesture. A Navajo, Dine mother braiding her daughter's hair with the help of a brush. From this care grows a visible bond between the two and a thread of collective memory that carries on, affirming belonging and sustaining the continuity of their culture, weaving together different times. In 1890 at Fort Sill, then in the Oklahoma Territory, photographer G.A. Addison captured Amy of the Kiowa Nation. The portrait was taken at a turning point. Policies and conflicts were reshaping Native lives in the United States. Amid displacement and loss, the image preserves a face, a story, and a time of change. In 1888, Frank A. Randall photographed an Apache woman in the region between New Mexico and Arizona. The scene shows her in traditional dress, sitting serenely. The framing preserves traces of her life and community, opening a window into the history and cultural continuity of the Apache people. At the end of the 19th century, a photographer recorded a group from the Crow Nation. Gathered together, men and women wear ceremonial clothing that carries knowledge, memory, and identity. The framing brings faces and bodies close, and without spectacle reveals a united community whose identity pulses in what they wear and how they stand. In 1948, near Gray Mountain, a 91-year-old Navajo elder gathered children and youth around a fire. As the flames crackled, he told stories passed down through generations, from the people's origins to present challenges. The gathering reaffirmed the power of spoken word as a bond that sustains collective memory. Rebecca Ketcher Nugent, remembered as the last known survivor of the forced Cherokee removal to Indian Territory, appears in this undated photograph. Next to a child, she carries the memory of the 1838 journey when she too was a girl, and the weight of a path that forever changed lives and lands. In 1916, a Native American, dressed in his cultural clothing, waited backstage at a Wild West show. Behind him were the backdrops of Buffalo Bill and the 101 Ranch Wild West combined, symbols of the traveling spectacles of the time. Captured by Burke Koretke, the photo holds a moment of transition between myth and stage display. For generations, the peoples of the Great Plains recorded life in pictographs. Among the Lakota, this annual record is called Wanietu Wawapi, or the winter count. Wawapi is what can be read or told. Wanietu marks the year, from the first snow to the last, stitching memory and time together while preserving collective experiences. Wasu Maza, or Dewey Beard, was Lakota, and still a teenager fought at Little Bighorn. After the victory over Custer's troops, he followed Sitting Bull into exile in Canada. Years later, he returned to South Dakota, settled on the Cheyenne River Reservation, and built his life there between memories of war and resilience. Before we continue, click subscribe and ring the bell. That way, YouTube knows this content is worth sharing with more people. Among the Southern Cheyenne, the Dogmen were one of 6 warrior societies. Responsible for defending the community, they operated both within and beyond their territory. They were seen as the bravest group and followed a code of life as strict as a monk's discipline. Their leadership guided decisions and inspired the young. Elsie Vance Chestuan was born in 1873 with the native name Chestuan. Her mother, Dilth Clay, was the daughter of Apache chief Biduya, or Victorio. Elsie's father is unknown. Later, her mother married Mangus, son of Mangus Coloradus, leader of the Chiricahua. Thus, Elsie's childhood wove together central bloodlines in Apache history. In 1884, during the construction of the Star House, Quanah Parker obtained something precious, a photograph from 1862 showing his mother, Cynthia Ann Parker, with little Prairie Flower, his 2-year-old sister. The image became his first concrete memory of his mother, taken away by the Texas Rangers in 1858. In 1886, members of the Pawnee Nation took part in Buffalo Bill's Wild West, the traveling show created by William F. Buffalo Bill Cody. The spectacle brought reenactments of the so-called Wild West to audiences, helping to cement on a large scale a version of the American West in popular imagination. Almost exactly 147 years ago, warriors from the Lakota, Dakota, Nakota, Northern Cheyenne, and Arapaho changed the course of history. They faced the U.S. 7th Cavalry under George A. Custer and won. The clash took place on June 25, 1876, at the Battle of the Greasy Grass, or Little Bighorn. In 1938, 12 Blackfeet men and other tribal members traveled from Montana to Hollywood in a rail car reserved by the Great Northern Railway. Their mission, to take part in filming a feature with Shirley Temple, then a rising child star, bringing authentic presence and native voice to the production and its photographs. At the end of the 19th century, the Apache faced a dilemma, seeking refuge in harsh mountainous terrain, while Mexican and U.S. troops pursued them relentlessly. Once they had been a reference point in North America, known for their courage and mastery of war tactics that shaped their reputation for decades. In the 1880s, A. Miller photographed the 3 Apache brothers. The portrait shows 3 young Apache men still before the camera, while the world around them was changing. The image captures not only their faces, but also a time of rupture for native peoples in North America. In silence and presence, their history echoes. Indigenous peoples of the Americas often lived in defined areas. The Blackfoot were different. Their presence stretched from Montana to the Saskatchewan Valley. In the 18th century, they moved westward, redrawing hunting routes and alliances, leaving lasting marks on North America's cultural map for generations. Joseph White Cow Bull of the Cheyenne Nation was portrayed by David Humphreys Miller around 1938. He became known as a survivor of the Battle of Little Bighorn, a pivotal moment in history. In his artistic research, Miller traveled the country to find and listen to those who lived through that battle and preserve their stories. Among the peoples of the southeastern United States, the Choctaw first appeared in European records in 1675, in French writings. Since then, their history has been told around Naniwaya, a sacred hill that anchors memory, rituals, and origin. A thread linking past and present, guiding community life. In 1908, photographer Roland W. Reed, dedicated to documenting the indigenous peoples of North America, took a portrait of an Ojibwe woman in Ponoma, Minnesota. Created in the early 20th century, the image reveals an encounter between gaze, land, and memory, preserving a story that crosses generations. American Horse, Lakota Leader, appears in a photograph from the early 20th century. His clothing announces his position and his people's memory. On his face, a silence that weighs. His eyes call us to the history he carries, a guide to many paths. Between fabrics and symbols, his presence affirms who leads and why he deserves to be heard. We've reached the end of our video. Subscribe to our channel and leave a comment if you liked the content. See you next time. The image shows a young Seminole woman with an ornate helmet, photographed in Hollywood, Florida, in 1973. The adornment signals preparation for a special moment, maybe a ceremony or rite. The helmet is part of the people's traditional clothing, a sign of belonging and living memory, which the camera captures in a moment of pause and expectation. Around 1913, the lens captures young Arawak getting ready for a celebration. In the far south of what was then British Guiana, today Guyana, They pose in outfits specific to the rite, pieces that tell the group's stories and show how the celebration brought generations together and marked life in the region, in that Amazonian territory. Before we go on, go ahead and click subscribe and turn on the bell. That way each new chapter gets to you at the right time and nothing on this journey slips by. The photograph shows athletes of the Creek Nation, also called Muskogee, in a scene from about 1870. The framing reveals how traditional games ran through everyday life. Gatherings that blended training, celebration, and memory, sustaining bonds, strengthening identities, and energizing the community's festivities. On August 26, 1877, a photograph brings together 4 Mojave leaders, portrayed with firmness and purpose, signaling authority and cultural continuity. The second from the left is Rowdy, from the Yuma tribe, who served as an interpreter and connected groups, a crucial role for dialogue among peoples in the region there. Dated 1908, the postcard portrays Quabazero from the Ojibwa Nation, also called Chippewa. She sits calmly in a low chair with a woven seat, a common piece in open areas and camps of the period. The image invites us to look at daily life and ways of being from that time, preserved there in a single frame. In 1903, Edward Curtis recorded a scene that pulls us into a valley along the edge of White Mountain, in Apache territory. In the image, horses of the community carry tools that ensure hunting, shelter, and travel. It's a direct slice of a nomadic way of life where every object has a function and every route a purpose. Between 1875 and 1890, a photograph captured a Blackfoot warrior whose name was lost. The portrait crossed time and decades later was chosen by a company in Calgary in the province of Alberta to become a commemorative card. And so the image left the archive and reached the public's hands as a keepsake. In 1944, in Tampa, at the height of World War II, Horace Pulaw, a Kiowa photographer specialized in aerial images, captured a rare scene. By his side was Gus Palmer, also Kiowa, serving as a gunner. Together they boarded a B-17 Flying Fortress, a symbol of the conflict, to document life on board. In the early years of the 20th century, a collection of postcards recorded scenes and routines of the Meskwaki community in Tama, Iowa. Together, these prints form a rare visual archive that lets us follow habits, relationships, and practices of the people, preserving traces of their everyday life and traditions. In 1880, the photograph records Rebecca Jumper, daughter of John Jumper, on the eve of leaving for seminary in Granville, Ohio. More than a portrait, it's a sign of a turning point, when education was beginning to open to women, and at greater cost to Native American women. Still rare but already underway, a foreshadowing of new paths. In 1930, Mary Alice Nelson of the Penobscot Nation was captured in a photograph that has crossed time. The Penobscot people live in the northeast of the U.S., especially Maine, preserving a rich cultural heritage. Mary's very name reveals the meeting between indigenous identity and the naming patterns brought by Europeans and Americans. In 1903, the women's basketball team from Fort Shaw appears in a photo, combining game uniforms with pieces tied to indigenous heritage. The combo suggests a gesture of identity, or a ritual shown to the crowd before or after games. Sports and tradition share the same frame. In this scene, memory and presence intersect. In 1903, a photograph presents the women's basketball team of the Fort Shaw Indian School. 7 young Native American women. Lined up like a class portrait, they face the camera. They wear long-sleeved blouses and modest skirts, a uniform that reflects the sports dress rules for women in that era. Bertha Stewart is Talawa, a people whose territory runs from Northern California to Southern Oregon. She grew up among stories, rituals, and principles that span generations. By preserving and passing on this knowledge, she shapes her own identity and guides how she acts and relates to the world. Before we continue, go ahead and click subscribe and turn on the bell. That way each new chapter gets to you at the right time and nothing on this journey slips by. In Oribe, one of the oldest villages in Arizona, a portrait brings together young Hopi. At the center, an albino girl draws the eye and leads the scene, pointing to the strong presence of albinism among the people at that time. In 1886, records pointed to a significant number of albino people in the community. In 1893, a photograph records a Tepehuan family in Durango, Mexico. taken by Carl Lumholtz, devoted to documenting indigenous peoples. It invites us to observe the essentials: attire, everyday gestures, and the bonds that shape the family organization of this group. In 1931, a Bororo man is captured in action in the waters of São Lourenço, applying fishing techniques inherited from his ancestors. The scene, shot in Mato Grosso, is more than a snapshot. It reveals routines, knowledge, and bonds of a people whose history is sustained by working with the river. The image shows a group in Tlaxcala in central eastern Mexico. They keep Aztec heritage alive, a lineage that stretches across centuries. Before European arrival, the Tlaxcalteca stood out for a unique political organization, with features close to a republic, shaping alliances and collective decisions. In Fort Sill, then in Indian Territory, William Stinson Soule recorded "Sisters of the Great Tree of the Kiowa Chief." The photograph, taken between 1874 and 1896, is part of a set that documents Native peoples and their daily lives. The work stands as a visual testimony that preserves memories and broadens our historical understanding. Chief Piapo, a Plains Cree leader, had the name Payapwat in his language, translated as "hole in the Sioux." Before that, he was called Kisikawasan, lightning in the sky. The name change marks his path, from the omen of an intense birth to the actions that made him a reference among his people over time. In the image, Kills 2, a healer of the Brule Sioux tribe, comes to the fore. His ceremonial clothing, leggings and a breechcloth, marks the continuity of knowledge and rites. Among symbols of belonging and care, he embodies the bridge between tradition and everyday life. The photograph reveals a social role that preserves cures and stories. In the photo, we see John Brown Jr., son of Lewis Carl Brown and Golda Donahue, born on August 27, 1921. His lineage is significant. He is the grandson of John Frippo Brown, the last chief of the Seminole Nation before the annexation of the territory to what is now Oklahoma, a link between family memory and a decisive chapter in indigenous history. On February 23, 1867, an emissary from the Sans Arc subdivision of the Lakota Sioux was in Washington, D.C. His presence indicated a stage of talks with the government. At stake were agreements and policies that would shape indigenous rights and territories, a subject that would remain contested in the years ahead. In the photo, we see Sarah Ayers Harris of the Catawba Nation, holding on to the memory of her ancestors. In 1908, at age 77, she was among the last people who still spoke the Catawba language. The portrait suggests a moment of transition. While the language was fading, her story insisted on remaining. It echoes to this day. A photograph from around 1885 portrays an Ojibwe woman, unnamed. Seeing her, we grasp not only her presence but echoes of many indigenous nations of North America, each with its own stories. This record holds traces of a time and of lives, preserving memories that, without the image, might have been lost. In 1908 in Washington, the camera records Rhoda Winier Williams, a Yakima woman. From the Columbia Plateau, her presence ties together territory, memory, and belonging. The photo isn't just a portrait. It's a clue to a time, an invitation to look at the history and daily life of a people who continue to assert their existence. In the photo appears Lena Cayuga, 17, a member of the Seneca people, one of the 6 nations of the Iroquois Confederacy. By all indications, the image was taken at the Louisiana Purchase Exposition in St. Louis, a fair that celebrated the Louisiana Purchase and marked U.S. history. The portrait shows a Native American woman. Her calm posture suggests respect for her people's roots. With her torso uncovered, she appears as in rituals or in a natural state. Crafted necklaces shape the scene and may indicate a community role or personal memories, guiding the eye and the narrative. We've reached the end of our video. Subscribe to our channel and leave a comment if you like the content. See you next time.